Fox 7 Austin's Honor Flight coverage is brought to you by Advanced Pain Care.
Hello and thanks for joining us for this Honor Flight Austin special. I'm Rebecca Thomas. During the next half hour, we are going to introduce you to some of our Central Texas veterans and the wonderful people who make their trips to the memorials in our nation's capital possible. All of this provided at no cost to our veterans. Now, this fall, I had the extraordinary opportunity to take the trip of a lifetime. In October, Honor Flight Austin took its second group of all-women veterans to D.C. and Arlington. In addition to visiting the war memorials, they got to see one built just for them. Take a look. 42 women veterans, most of them from Central Texas, spent Saturday, October 20th, touring their war memorials in Washington, D.C. and Arlington.
This is for you. There are the gold stars, the reflecting pool of the Lincoln. I took it atop the Washington Monument with my thank you for your service.
Thank you.
This is 96-year-old Anna Gotti's third visit to the World War II Memorial with Honor Flight Austin. The Navy veteran worked stateside in intelligence during the war.
We just happened to be there at the right time. Anybody who was there would have done the same thing. There was nothing special about us.
It just looks so real.
Most of the women in this group are veterans of the Vietnam War. Some found names of friends and loved ones on the wall, including Alicia Pineda of San Marcos. Richard Lopez, her childhood friend, was killed at the age of 19.
I came to pay my respects to all those who fell that I didn't know and those that I didn't know.
The women also witnessed the changing of the guard ceremony and placed a wreath at the tomb of the unknown soldier. While much of the tour was somber and reflective, there were also moments of levity.
I'm the Army Nurse Corps. Well done.
A special stop is the Women's Memorial, dedicated to their service.
Well, I'm prejudiced, of course. It's about time they had one. Took them a while to do it, but I know it's great.
You made it possible. You paved the way.
Vice Admiral Raquel Cruz Bono, a UT grad and the highest-ranking female in the Navy Medical Corps, greeted the veterans and was as honored to meet them as they were to meet her.
This is very special. Many of these women paved the way for the rest of us. If it weren't for them, so many of us women in military, in uniform today, would not have been able to achieve the ranks that we have today. It's incredible.
The veterans whose shoulders she stood on appreciate that recognition.
It's humbling. It really is. We had a great return on our investment with her. She's inspiring.
At the end of the whirlwind 30-plus hour trip, tears were shed, laughs were shared, and friends were made, with Gotti's wit and grit leading the charge.
Just think of all the people who have done so much and sacrificed so much for our country. Don't forget them. I get all weepy.
And the home of the brave.
Honor flights mean different things to different veterans. For some, it's about camaraderie and seeing the memorials with other vets. For others, it's a personal mission.
It's one of those things that, what's the worst that can happen? You know, they travel with EMTs. People are just so ready to just celebrate you. And sometimes people need that.
Dina Taylor, a local jazz singer, spent 12 years in the U.S. Navy, part of that time during the Vietnam War. In October, she made the decision to go on an all-female veteran honor flight.
And I enjoyed it because for me, I had the perfect guardian escort, which was Staff Sergeant Perez, who is a young Marine.
Taylor was also on a personal mission. During her time in the service, she was stationed in Washington, D.C., but until this trip, couldn't bring herself to visit the Vietnam Veterans Memorial.
When you go to the wall, it's just not a manageable number because there's so many. And there's no way of saying there's not so many. You see them, and each one has a name.
And there was one name in particular she needed to see, that of her childhood friend who was killed in Vietnam at the age of 21.
The fact that I would be with people kind of made me think, oh, well, that's probably a good thing, until I realized the enormity of what I was getting ready to do. And I thought, oh, no, with my personality, I still need to do it alone. I didn't do it alone, though, because I had the Marines at my 6.
Taylor found the panel, saw her friend's name, and as you can see, her guardian escort really did have her back.
You know, I wrote a blog article about the experience, and it was, hello, goodbye, and then hello again. A hello when you walk away, because it's like, now you're more a part of my now, because you're not buried quite as deep. It was a wonderful experience. No miraculous healings, you know, because I have my own scars and things, but I faced some of my issues, and I was able to face them thanks to Sergeant Perez and having that real steady presence.
Taylor encourages other veterans who might be on the fence about going on an honor flight to accept the opportunity.
So what I would tell any vet that's worried about having forced socialization, which was one of the reasons that I stayed away from it for so long, that's not an issue. You can socialize if you want. If all you want to do is just kind of stay tucked in with your guardian escort, then that allows you to focus on that and still have an experience that's almost tailor-made for you.
Taylor was so moved by her experience that she had with Honor Flight Austin, she made it her mission to help other veterans take the trip. This fall, she held an online auction and raised more than $5,000, which will pay for the honor flights of 5 veterans in 2019. As you can imagine, there is a lot that goes into making each honor flight a smooth and memorable experience for veterans. And much of that responsibility falls on Honor Flight Austin guardians who are assigned to each vet. Some are from Central Texas, others are in the D.C. area. Now, guardians are with their veterans at all times during the tours. Pam Mariklein has been on 2 honor flights. She's also a veteran, as are many of the younger guardians. Most recently, Mariklein was assigned to Anna Gotti, a World War II veteran, on the all-women veterans honor flight. And she says she'd volunteer again in a heartbeat.
Even though the memorials are the same, the stories is different, and the people are different. And you get friendships and out of those events, and going back and just, yeah, it's definitely a privilege. Seeing the reaction of these World War II, Korean, Vietnam veterans, it's just, no words.
Now, there is a $400 fee for guardians per trip. That covers airfare, hotel, and ground transportation. To learn more about becoming a guardian, visit honorflightaustin.org. They served their country overseas at a time when they didn't enjoy the basic rights of their fellow Americans back at home. Coming up, we'll hear from a group of African American veterans who recently made a special trip with Honor Flight Austin. Welcome back. In November, 50 African American veterans from Central Texas took an Honor Flight Austin trip to Washington, D.C. to visit the memorials built in their honor. Fox 7 Austin's Bridget Spencer has the story.
For the bulk of them, it's a warm welcome they never got.
You know, I've never felt so humble as I did coming through the airports, and the people saying welcome home and thank you for your service.
Otis Brown is one of the Vietnam veterans on board Honor Flight Austin's first African American journey. The group flew to D.C. to see cherished memorials and monuments dedicated to themselves and their fallen comrades. Not long after approaching the Vietnam War Memorial, Otis began to reflect.
It brings back vivid memories. A lot of times those rocket attacks would come and, you know, you just kind of helpless in these bunkers and, you know, nothing you can do but pray.
Vietnam veterans were the majority on board this honor flight of 50. While taking a look at the more than 50,000 names of those killed in the Vietnam War, George Gage spotted his close friend's name, James Hamilton.
We trained together. We went to each other's house before we went to Vietnam. I met his wife. He met my mom and dad.
George says James was the first person killed in his battalion. He died right on top of him.
I felt the last breath leave his body because it was bubbling, because it went through his chest and the blood was splashing.
In the same night, vets got to see the World War II Memorial. Theodore Johnson served as a Tuskegee Airman.
It's a pleasant journey to be here, and I'm glad to be here because I know I'm still alive. Otherwise, I'm just enjoying the ride.
At the time Theodore was serving, America was not only dealing with a world war, but also a race war back home. But Theodore's message of unity has always been the same.
I'm not no African American. You'll classify me as being an African American and seeing about African American, but I'm just as American as apple pie, because everybody here is American.
Well, about halfway through the trip, the veterans made a stop at the African American History Museum. But the interesting thing about it is many of these veterans lived some of the history that's on display inside of this building. Taking a look at this statue of the protesters at the 1968 Olympics sparked some memories for Willie Lewis.
It was during the time that I was what I would call a rebel rouser in the 60s, late 60s, and I remember that process very well. You know, when the Black Power movement was in its highest force.
The next stop was Arlington Cemetery, where they witnessed the changing of the guard and laying of the wreath. Then it was on to the Iwo Jima Memorial.
Of United States Marines.
What does coming here bring to you?
Memories and a sense of dedication.
Ernest Banks is a Marine. He says he learned discipline, respect for his nation, and respect for his fellow countrymen. The same ideals these Marines showcased while raising the flag in Iwo Jima.
They instilled in us about that, about how brave those young men were that raised that flag on Mount Suribachi.
Before ending the trip, the veterans visited the MLK, Navy, and Air Force memorials. They fought during divisive times, both overseas and back at home. But those struggles never stopped these vets from believing in something bigger, freedom, and a love for their country. In Washington, Bridget Spencer, Fox 7 Austin News.
Coming up, we'll introduce you to the co-founders of Honor Flight Austin, who tell us why this organization is vital for our Central Texas veterans. According to Honor Flight Austin, we are losing about 500 World War II veterans every day. So time is of the essence when it comes to making sure our American heroes get the opportunity to visit their memorial in Washington, D.C. Joining us now are two men who helped start Honor Flight Austin, former Austin Mayor Lee Leffingwell and Alan Bergeron, who's the Veterans Program Administrator for the City of Austin. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Thanks.
Alan, you and Lee are both veterans. When did you decide that Austin needed this kind of service for our veterans?
Well, it kind of migrated through our office, the City of Austin's Veterans Program Office that former Mayor Lee Leffingwell created in 2007 on Veterans Day, unveiled the City of Austin's Veterans Program. And that's the program that kind of evolved over time. And it was in 2011 we realized that we needed to join this national movement called Honor Flight. And former Mayor Lee Leffingwell was instrumental in making that happen, and to include everything else that happened in the early days of the Veterans Program. He's a Navy veteran, very, very strong supporter of veteran causes and issues, and we're lucky to have him.
Lee, what was your motivation to get Honor Flight in Austin?
Well, this is before I was mayor. I was a council member, and I noticed that I was the only veteran on the Austin City Council. And at that time, the city had a lot of employees who were being called to active duty as members of the National Guard and Reserves, and it was quite a hardship on them. So I sponsored an initiative to establish programs to assist these city employees while they were called to active duty, such things as maintaining their pay, they didn't have to take a pay cut, maintaining the benefits, including health insurance for their families, etc. And we required an employee dedicated to make sure this program was carried out. And so we hired a veterans officer, and that turned out to be Gunnery Sergeant Alan Bergeron here next to me. And out of that effort sprang lots of other things that we did for veterans. We assisted the state and county with veteran unemployment, veteran homelessness, which we have now ended now in the city of Austin. And we also renovated the Vietnam Memorial in Austin down on I-35 and Cedar Chavez. But the biggest thing of all has been this Honor Flight Austin, which has been highly successful thanks to the efforts of Alan and a whole bunch of volunteers. You know, Honor Flight is a nonprofit organization. We're very proud of the fact that all the people that work for this nonprofit organization are unpaid. They're all volunteers, most of them veterans, but not all, certainly. But it's been, you know, we've taken, what, over 2,000 World War II veterans alone, and now we're beginning to take others from Vietnam and Korea.
And so far, there have been 56 of these honor flights. They're described as a trip of a lifetime. Alan, what goes into each flight?
First of all, a lot of planning. And as the mayor alluded to, we have so many wonderful volunteers. You know, the entire board and, of course, volunteers that fall in love with Honor Flight. It's an easy sell. We're all connected some way, shape, or form to World War II veterans and, of course, Korea and Vietnam veterans. And, you know, we typically average 3 or 4 flights in the spring, 3 or 4 flights in the fall, and a lot of what we call operational requirements, logistics, medical, administrative support. It's a lot of moving parts, but we have so many wonderful people that own different elements of those, and it all just comes together and creates what we call a trip of a lifetime for these heroes.
And once again, honor flights are free to veterans. We're talking the flight, the hotel, the food, all provided.
Important, very important point. It's their trip. It's free, the airfare, the hotel, the ground transportation, and all of that is funded by private donations. We don't take any government assistance of any kind, and we're very proud of the efforts that we've made on their behalf. And I'll tell you, you may think you're a pretty hardened person, but if you go out to the airport when these guys are leaving Austin and watch the public turn out and salute them as they're on their way out, in the same way when you arrive in Washington, D.C. and see the welcome they get and the emotional experience it is for them, and even Alan and I, as many times as we've been, we all still get very emotional about seeing the gratitude that the public displays for these people who gave service to our country.
It really is wonderful. And if you're watching and you would like to learn more about getting a veteran on an honor flight, or if you would like to make a donation, visit honorflightaustin.org. Alan, Lee, thank you both for your time. Thank you for your service. And of course, thank you for what you're doing for our vets.
My pleasure. Thanks.
Thank you.
At the age of 96, she's been on 3 honor flights and is an ambassador for Honor Flight Austin. The remarkable life of Anna Gotti, next. Anna Gotti is a veteran of World War II, and her memories of her duties in that war are sharp. She also recognizes the contribution she made to the many women who came after her.
I didn't do it. I wasn't there. It's not my fault. So there.
This spirited woman is 96-year-old Anna Gotti. The World War II veteran attributes her long life to her Italian genes, a glass of wine at dinner, and, you guessed it, finding the funny in things.
I think life is great. I enjoy it. I like having fun. You know, keep a sense of humor and you're all set.
Gotti was born in 1922 in Massachusetts, where she spent her formative years. After she graduated from Boston University with a degree in French.
My husband went to Harvard, and he always referred to BU as that high school across the river.
She joined the Navy in 1942, not long after the start of the Second World War.
Well, my father, even though he immigrated from Italy, fought on the American Army in World War I. And he didn't have a son to carry on the family tradition, so I thought I'd better step in and do it. I was a language major, and the Navy sent me to meteorology school. I, who hated science and math with a passion.
Gotti then reported for duty in Alameda, California. Initially, she mapped out forecasts for pilots abroad. Then Gotti moved on to work in naval intelligence.
Here were these women invading this man's world, huh? And the regular Navy people were very unhappy with this, and they really made our life tough. But then when they saw that we were serious, we learned our jobs, we did our jobs well, then they started accepting us. Then they even started dating us, so we were in.
During a recent all-women Veterans Honor Flight Austin trip to the memorials in D.C. and Arlington, Gotti saw firsthand what her service meant, not only to her country, but to other women in the military.
This is very special. Many of these women paved the way for the rest of us. If it weren't for them, so many of us women in military, in uniform today, would not have been able to achieve the ranks that we have today. It's incredible.
Vice Admiral Raquel Cruz Bono, a UT grad and the highest-ranking female in the Navy Medical Corps, greeted the veterans at the Women's Memorial, and Gotti was thoroughly impressed.
She's very wise and very gracious to admit that she's where she is because of what came before her. Those of us who opened the door, and we did.
Gotti spent 4 years serving her country. She has since been on 3 trips with Honor Flight Austin and says each visit to the war memorials is as powerful and moving as the last.
To me, you can't help seeing them and feeling and realizing what they mean, what they represent.
After she left the Navy, Gotti went to work for a telephone company and got married. She and her husband, Corey, were married for 60 years before he died in 2009. They had 3 sons. And because her husband worked for the Foreign Service, the family spent 30 years living in Europe, the Middle East, and the Dominican Republic.
Made me personally, and especially our children, very non-racist. They lived and played with all kinds, and were very tolerant of all kinds of people, all kinds of religion, all kinds of food.
Once Gotti's husband retired, it was time to head back to the States. They didn't want to live in the cold Northeast where they grew up, so they chose Austin.
We flew home, left the kids with the grandparents, flew down here, and I'm looking out the window and saying, oh, look at the hills. Oh, look at the green stuff. I thought it was going to be flat and brown.
40 years later, Gotti is still loving her active life in her Northeast Austin retirement community and has this advice for living a good life.
Keep busy, socialize, and if you have a friend or friends, take good care of them. I mean, you'll have lots of acquaintances, but if you have a real friend, cherish that friend.
Mrs. Gotti is now an ambassador for Honor Flight Austin. She's made 3 trips so far. Again, Honor Flight Austin visits are free for the veterans, paid for by your donations. To help with future trips, visit honorflightaustin.org. Thanks for watching and happy holidays.